At 4:18 p.m. local time, the Caribbean looks almost too calm. The sea is flat, the wind is light, and visibility runs for miles in every direction. For a U.S. Navy Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, it should feel like another ordinary patrol through international waters. The kind of mission sailors record in the log and move past without a second thought. But inside the ship, nobody is treating it like routine. In the Combat Information Center, radar screens glow in the dim light as contacts move steadily across the display. Most of them are exactly what the crew expects to see. Distant merchant traffic, slow civilian boats, and the occasional regional patrol vessel keeping its distance. Then one contact begins to stand out. At first, it is subtle. A Venezuelan naval ship, surface contact, constant speed, parallel course. That kind of shadowing is not unusual in the Caribbean. It can happen after interdictions, after seizures, or after any moment when regional pride feels challenged. Most of the time, it stays professional. Most of the time. Then the numbers begin to change. The Venezuelan ship shifts course, not slightly, not gradually, but with purpose. Its bow turns inward, lining up directly toward the U.S. destroyer. Almost at once, its speed increases. Not cruising speed, not patrol speed, intercept speed. On the radar, the CPA, closest point of approach, starts shrinking fast. 4 nautical miles, 3.7, 3.2. The radar operator calls it out. In the CIC, the surface warfare officer confirms the new vector. Voices become shorter. Casual conversation disappears. Precision takes over. This is no longer routine monitoring. This is a situation developing in real time. On the bridge, binoculars come up. The Venezuelan ship is clearly visible now. Gray hull, naval profile, movement from the crew on deck. This is not a civilian vessel, and this is not an accident. Standard procedure begins immediately. The first radio call goes out over open channels. Unidentified Venezuelan naval vessel, this is a United States Navy warship operating in international waters. You are approaching at high speed. Alter course immediately. No response. A second call follows, this time in Spanish. Clear. Professional. Exactly by procedure. Still nothing. At sea, silence at close range is never neutral. It is a decision, and every decision forces another in return. The destroyer does not alter course. It does not increase speed. It does not overreact. Instead, it starts recording everything. Timestamps, bearing changes, speed shifts. Every move is logged. The ship's SPY-1D radar keeps a precise track on the Venezuelan vessel. Below deck, the SLQ-32 electronic warfare system begins capturing emissions, radar sweeps, and signal patterns, anything the other ship is willing to reveal. This is not preparation for a fight. It is preparation for accountability. The CPA drops below 3 nautical miles. At that distance, serious incidents rarely begin with missiles. They begin with misjudgment, a hard turn, a late correction. One moment when pride outweighs seamanship, and still the Venezuelan ship keeps coming. No evasive move, no radio reply, no visible attempt to create safe separation. The approach is deliberate, reducing space and testing restraint. Pressure without a single spoken word. On the bridge of the U.S. destroyer, the captain studies the situation in silence. The rules of engagement are clear. Weapons stay cold, but posture matters. Presence matters, and the next decision will shape everything that comes after. This is the kind of moment history often labels the wrong way. Some people will call it a misunderstanding, others will call it a provocation. But the sailors standing watch know better. Courses do not change on their own. Ships do not accelerate by mistake. The Venezuelan vessel is now close enough that intent cannot be ignored. Even so, no shots are fired, no alarms cut through the air. No dramatic maneuver disturbs the still surface of the sea. The U.S. Navy does not flinch, but it does not rush either. Because sometimes the strongest response is not loud, it is not destructive, and it is rarely the one anyone expects. Then, only minutes later, the U.S. Navy makes a move the Venezuelan crew did not see coming. Not a threat, but a decision that forces a decision in return. That is when everything changes. Inside the destroyer, the atmosphere grows tighter, not from panic, but from focus. This is where routine ends and procedure fully takes over. In the Combat Information Center, the Venezuelan ship is no longer just another contact on a screen. It now has a designation, a track number, and a growing data profile building line by line. Speed rising, course converging, CPA slipping below normal safety margins. Every watchstander understands what that means. The surface warfare coordinator leans toward the display. He does not need to raise his voice. No one in the room needs an explanation. At sea, distance equals time, and time is the only thing standing between miscalculation and collision, or something even more serious. The ship's systems shift almost invisibly. The SPY-1D radar narrows its tracking resolution, feeding exact vectors into the combat system. The destroyer's cameras are automatically cued, with long-range optics locking onto the approaching Venezuelan ship. Video appears on auxiliary screens, tight shots of the bow, the superstructure, the deck. Crew movement is visible. Not chaotic, not hurried, intentional. That detail matters. If this were confusion, there would be hesitation. If this were an error, there would be correction. Instead, the Venezuelan ship holds its line, steady, assertive, unmistakable. Below deck, the SLQ-32 electronic warfare suite begins flagging emissions. Low-power surface search radar. Intermittent sweeps. Nothing that qualifies as weapons targeting, at least not yet, but enough to show active tracking. The data is stored automatically. Frequencies, pulse repetition, signal strength. This is how modern standoffs unfold, not with gunfire, but with records. On the bridge, the officer of the deck gives the updated CPA to the captain. Under 3 nautical miles now. Still closing. No response to radio calls, no course deviation. The captain gives a single nod. Maintain course and speed. That order is not stubbornness, it is discipline. Under international maritime rules, changing course in a moment like this could be read as yielding the right of way, or worse, as acknowledging the other vessel's attempt to control the space. The U.S. destroyer is operating legally, openly, and deliberately. It will not move unless safety makes it necessary, and safety is exactly what is being tested. Inside the CIC, contingency procedures are already running side by side. Notes, escalation checks, de-escalation protocols, aviation assets reviewed, communications logged, non-lethal response options confirmed. That is the quiet difference between a professional navy and an impulsive one. The Venezuelan ship keeps coming. At this distance, a sudden turn by either vessel would create massive wake interaction. Hydrodynamic forces alone could make control difficult. Everyone involved understands that, which makes the continued closing impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Another sensor update comes in. The Venezuelan vessel's speed has stabilized, high but steady. Its heading has not changed. To any trained mariner, that sends a clear message. We want you to feel this pressure without physical contact. The captain studies the plot once more. He knows exactly what his ship is capable of. He also knows exactly what it does not need to do. Opening fire here would be a disaster, legally and strategically. Overreacting would hand over the narrative, but doing absolutely nothing would invite more testing. So the answer is not force, it is presence. The captain turns slightly toward the air operations officer. Prepare the helo. That order does not shift the ship into a hostile posture. It shifts the ship into a posture that is impossible to misread. On the flight deck, sailors move quickly but without wasted motion. The MH-60 Seahawk sits folded and secured, its gray frame blending into the steel around it. Tie-downs come off. Pre-flight checks begin. No panic, no rushing, just discipline. Every step is familiar. Every movement is intentional. Back in the CIC, the Venezuelan contact holds steady. The CPA is now hovering near a distance naval officers do not like to see. The helicopter systems come alive one by one. Sensors warm up. Data links connect with the ship's combat network. The Seahawk is not launching to intimidate. It is not there to fly recklessly. Its role is observation and unmistakable signaling. Above deck, the rotors begin to turn, slowly at first, then faster. From the Venezuelan ship, that sound cannot be ignored. And for the first time since the encounter began, the center of attention starts to shift. A ship can ignore radio calls. A crew can act as if radar logs do not matter. But when a Navy helicopter rises from the deck of the warship you are approaching and moves into the space between you and your objective, calm, steady, and recording every second, the situation enters a different phase. And that phase demands a decision. The helicopter lifts cleanly from the deck and moves out over open water, its rotors beating a steady rhythm across the sea. From the bridge of the U.S. destroyer, the launch is routine. From the Venezuelan ship, it is anything but. Because this is the moment when posture gives way to consequences. At sea, some lines do not appear on charts. They are not marked by borders or written into treaties. They are defined by behavior, by speed, by angle, by silence. Every Navy understands those lines, even if few would ever admit it out loud. And one of those lines is simple. You do not close aggressively on a warship while ignoring repeated hails unless you intend to be noticed. The MH-60 Seahawk does not rush at the Venezuelan vessel. It does not drop low in a dramatic show. Instead, it takes up a measured position, offset, elevated, and impossible to miss. Its sensors activate, sending real-time imagery back to the destroyer's combat system. Infrared, optical zoom, laser range finding, every detail on the Venezuelan ship is now being captured. Every movement on deck, every heat signature, every visible reaction, everything is being time-stamped and stored. This is not intimidation, this is documentation. Inside the CIC, the tone changes again. The Venezuelan ship's radar emissions rise slightly. Still not a fire control profile, still not the kind of signal that would indicate a direct attack, but no longer passive either. The SLQ-32 flags it immediately. The data rolls across the screens. Frequency, strength, duration. Now they are tracking the helicopter. That matters. Tracking alone is not automatically hostile, but combined with aggressive maneuvering and continued radio silence, it pushes the situation closer to a threshold professional navies are trained to avoid. This is how serious incidents begin, not with a single clear intention, but with too many signals layered on top of each other. On the bridge, the captain studies both the surface plot and the air picture. The Venezuelan ship is still on a converging line, but its speed is no longer increasing. It is a subtle change, almost invisible to anyone without training, but trained eyes catch it at once. The pressure is working. This is the nature of a modern naval standoff. No dramatic exchange, no loud display, just measured force applied at exactly the right point. The helicopter begins a slow lateral pass, remaining within international airspace. Its laser marker flashes briefly, not as an attack cue, but as a visual signal. A bright, unmistakable point moves across the Venezuelan ship's superstructure, then settles near the bridge. Impossible to overlook. On the Venezuelan deck, sailors hesitate. Some look up, others move aft. Through the Seahawk's camera, body language becomes readable. This is not panic, but it is no longer confidence either. Then, for the first time since the encounter began, the pattern changes. The Venezuelan ship adjusts its helm. Not a sharp turn, not a dramatic breakaway, just a few degrees. Enough to widen the CPA, enough to show a second thought has entered the equation. A moment later, its speed begins to fall, slowly and deliberately, as if the crew wants that change to look entirely self-directed. Inside the CIC, the numbers confirm it. CPA increasing, relative bearing stabilizing, closure rate decreasing. The line has been approached but not crossed. The helicopter holds its position a little longer, continuing to record. No shouted warnings, no unnecessary gestures, none are needed. The message has already been delivered. We see you. We have documented this. And we are ready to respond further if you leave us no choice. Then, at last, a radio transmission breaks the silence. Not an apology, not a retreat, just words, a claim of sovereign patrol, a request for the U.S. ship to alter course. The phrasing is careful, familiar, political, but the critical detail is not the content. It is the fact that communication has finally begun. The destroyer answers immediately, calm and precise. This is a United States Navy warship conducting lawful transit in international waters. Your unsafe maneuvering has been recorded. No threats, no ultimatums, just facts. The helicopter begins to peel away, climbing gently and curving back toward the destroyer. The Venezuelan ship continues to slow, its bow now clearly offset from the U.S. vessel's track. The encounter starts to unwind with the same care that shaped it. No one celebrates, no one fully relaxes. Because everyone on both ships understands what really happened. This was never about winning a confrontation. It was about defining a boundary. The Venezuelan Navy tested how close it could come without consequence. The U.S. Navy answered without a shot, but with complete clarity. At sea, that can be the most dangerous kind of message, because next time, the distance to that line may be even smaller. From the Venezuelan ship, the moment feels different now. Until this point, the encounter has been steel against steel, hulls cutting through water, numbers moving across radar displays, silence carrying most of the meaning. But once the helicopter settles into position and the bright point of its marker touches the bridge windows, the situation becomes personal. This is no longer just an abstract contest of bearings and speed. This is direct awareness. Through the Seahawk's forward camera, faces come into view. Helmets, binoculars. A hand lifts briefly, then drops. The image is sharp enough to reveal hesitation settling in where confidence had been moments earlier. The helicopter compresses distance in a way ships never can, and that is exactly why it is there. On board the U.S. destroyer, the CIC watches the live feed in real time. The aircrew speaks only when necessary. Every second of video is time-stamped, geolocated, and duplicated into secure storage. This is evidence now, not just of position, but of behavior. Below, the Venezuelan ship's wake begins to shorten. At first, it is almost too subtle to notice, the kind of change an untrained observer might miss completely. But trained sailors notice right away. The speed drops by a knot, then another. The bow shifts outward by the smallest margin. What had been a tight intercept angle begins to relax. This is the decisive moment. If the Venezuelan crew changes its mind, powers up again, closes the gap, and ignores the helicopter, the situation moves into far more dangerous territory. At this range, there is almost no room left for error, and even less room left for diplomacy. But that is not what happens. Instead, the Venezuelan ship steadies. The aggressive geometry begins to disappear. The CPA widens enough to move back into a safer zone, even if national pride still insists on staying nearby. Then the radio finally comes alive. United States naval vessel, we are conducting sovereign patrol operations in the vicinity of Venezuelan waters. It is a carefully shaped line, not an apology, not an admission, but it is no longer silence. And in a maritime standoff, the simple act of speaking is already a step back from the edge. The U.S. reply comes immediately. This is a United States Navy warship conducting lawful transit in international waters. Your unsafe maneuvers have been recorded. No threats, no demands, just a calm statement of fact. The helicopter remains on station for one more long, quiet orbit. The camera stays fixed. The laser does not appear again. It does not need to. The message has already been understood. On the Venezuelan deck, crew members begin moving away from the forward gun mount. One sailor briefly raises both hands, palms outward, a gesture recognized anywhere at sea. It is not surrender, it is acknowledgement. At last, the helicopter turns away. Its climb is smooth and controlled, with no dramatic pull-up and no aggressive bank, just a steady arc back toward the destroyer. The sound of the rotors fades into the background rhythm of the sea. As it departs, the Venezuelan ship maintains its reduced speed and altered course. In practical terms, the encounter is over. On the U.S. destroyer, the Seahawk lands and is secured without ceremony. The flight deck crew works efficiently, already shifting back toward normal operations. Inside the CIC, the record is being completed. Logs are finalized, video files are cataloged, sensor data is archived. From the first course change to the final radio transmission, the entire encounter now exists in exact detail. This is how modern naval power makes its point. Not through destruction, not through shouted warnings, but through discipline, documentation, and the ability to apply pressure without surrendering control. From a distance, some people might mistake restraint for weakness. But navies do not measure strength by volume. They measure it by outcomes. And in this encounter, only one side altered course. The Venezuelan ship remains visible on radar, now well outside any unsafe approach. It does not fully withdraw, but it also does not resume the challenge. It simply stays at a distance that reflects reality. And that, in its own way, is the result. Because the real objective that afternoon was never to dominate the water. It was to show that escalation is a choice, and that the side with better control decides when the moment ends. No shots, no damage, no headlines, at least not yet. But the lesson has been delivered quietly, clearly, and in full view of every sensor watching the Caribbean that day. And for anyone else considering a similar move, the message is already written into the logs. The U.S. Navy does not need to chase. It only needs to wait, observe, and record. By the time the helicopter is secured and the flight deck falls silent again, the Caribbean looks exactly the way it did before the encounter began. The same calm water, the same open horizon, the same misleading sense of peace. But inside the destroyer, everything is different. The work continues long after the Venezuelan ship has moved to a safe distance. This is the part the public rarely sees. No dramatic visuals, no urgent voices over the radio. Just professionals handling the kind of work modern naval power actually depends on. Logs are reviewed, sensor data is cross-checked, video timelines are synchronized down to the second. Every bearing change, every speed adjustment. Every moment of silence, every word spoken once that silence finally ended. All of it becomes part of the official record, not for headlines, for history, for legal review, for the next encounter, because there is always a next encounter. For hours, the Venezuelan ship remains on radar, holding a parallel course at a respectful distance. It does not attempt another approach. It does not challenge the airspace again. Whatever message it meant to send has already received an answer, not through force, but through control. And that is the point most people miss. This was never about bigger weapons or faster ships. The outcome was settled long before any weapon would have mattered. It was settled by discipline, by restraint, and by a deep understanding of how escalation really works at sea. Venezuela pushed in fast, betting that proximity would create leverage, that pressure would force a reaction. Instead, it triggered something far more difficult for it to manage. Visibility. Every aggressive movement was captured. Every unsafe maneuver was documented. Every claim of sovereign patrol now sits beside time-stamped evidence, showing the full sequence of events. In the modern maritime world, evidence is power. If the US ship had fired a warning shot, the narrative would have changed instantly. If it had altered course first, the signal across the region would have looked very different. But by holding course, launching a helicopter, and forcing communication without escalating, the US Navy controlled both the encounter and the version of events that followed. That is how gray zone confrontations are managed. Not by crossing the line, but by making the other side step away from it. For the Venezuelan Navy, the lesson is quiet but unmistakable. Aggressive approaches bring scrutiny, not concessions. And scrutiny is something smaller navies can least afford when operating under international law. For the US Navy, the lesson is reinforced once again. Presence works. Documentation works. And restraint, when backed by overwhelming capability, is not weakness. It is leverage. No medals are handed out for this kind of encounter. No press conference follows. Sailors finish the watch, log the event, and move on. That is exactly how it is meant to be. But somewhere else in briefing rooms, intelligence centers, and foreign naval headquarters, this interaction will be studied frame by frame. The angles, the timing, the response. The exact moment when pressure met discipline, and discipline held. Because next time, the ship may be different. The sea may be rougher. The margin for error may be smaller. And the same question will return. How close is too close? How fast is too fast? And what happens when restraint is mistaken for hesitation? That question is not theoretical. It is being tested every week in waters like these. So the real takeaway is this. The encounter did not end because one side was louder. It ended because one side stayed in control. And in modern naval confrontation, control is everything. Imagine standing on the bridge of that destroyer, watching a foreign warship close the distance, ignore your calls, and test your resolve. Would you have held course, or would you have answered with a harder move?